Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a super awesome guest today. He is an education professional with a Master of Fine Arts focused in media arts from Emily Carr University of Art and Design. Please join me in welcoming Rafa Puyana. Welcome, Rafa. How's it going?
Thomas, thanks for the invitation and hi everyone. Broadcasting here from Bogota, Colombia. And I hope that my English is not getting rusty after a few years of being back home. And I hope things gonna make sense in this conversation and hopefully useful for someone who can listen to this like in uh, 2022 or I don't know 2030 or some other place in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro. Are you ready for 20 questions?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, question one. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Well, as I said, I live in Bogota, Colombia. I have lived here most of my life, except a few years in Canada, where we met, and also some months and week here and there in Germany and Southeast Asia. I am an artist by practice, although I have an MFA from Emily Carr, as you said, focusing in new media. I am also a life coder, which somehow falls into the art category, but it is something that I have been doing lately that has expanded into other areas of my life in relation to creating bonds and growing community with incredible people and, like helping others get into the practice, communicating with people all over the world, teaching workshops, playing gigs, music, etc. It is this live coding is this weird thing of improvising images and sounds via code, something that I found like 4 years ago, and since then it captured all like most of my creative attention into creating my own practice and also growing community with people. I'm also part of an artistic and environmental collective. The name of the collective is Bosterra. We work recording soundscapes and ecosystems, especially endangered ecosystems in Colombia. And we also work with artists and musicians so they can create music with these sounds and inspired by these sounds. We also work with communities and organizations that are taking care of these endangered ecosystems, whether if they're living there, taking care of the ecosystems, and people around these places, or activists protecting these ecosystems. So we work closely with them. We started in 2019. We got funded by an organization called the UN Life Museum. And the base of this organization is in Copenhagen, but they have projects in Colombia and India. I think that in Singapore, in country in Africa that I don't recall right now. They support artistic projects and they help us grow from there, from the origins of the collective. We produce a series of albums during 2020 called Sounds from Your Windows, and this was a wonderful experience because as a graphic designer and new media artist, I haven't been involved in music production at all. So it was great, and we invited many people all over the world into sending recordings from nature from their windows during the lockdowns that took place in 2020. And then with those sounds, other artists built and created music, and that which took shape in 4 albums. And then later on, lately, we have been working in this, evolving this concept that right now we are with the museum working in this model where we want ecosystems to be considered as artists, so they can have like somehow or some type of copyright or authorship rights as sound artists, and they can collaborate and they can get money from streaming or from renting the sounds or from using the sounds in movies. So through our collective, we bring the idea is to bring in this revenue into the organizations that protect the ecosystem. So that's kind of like these two big things in terms of our art. But I'm also a graphic designer by training, and it's somehow how I may pay my bills, because I don't like the term making a living, but paying the bills, and spend most of my day working with clients and basically as a product designer for different companies, building website strategies for interfaces, for websites. I am right now ended up working in the film industry, creating fictional interfaces uh, and uh, and also facilitating now like design sprints and trying to get into earlier stages of the design process, which is something that interests me more now than actually designing the products themselves, like visually. I think that you and I met, and when we were teaching some design workshops at Emily Carr. So I always remember those times fondly, because I learned a lot working next to you during those weeks. And in that way I also teach, right? I don't like somehow the word teacher or teaching. I prefer the term like learning enhancer. Like, I believe that it's really hard to teach something to other people. I prefer to facilitate or provide all the conditions so the learning arises in that area. So I mean I basically focus on teaching. Let's use teaching uh, design students in their first stage of learning. Here in Colombia, I had some courses in Canada, and also in my art practice, like we teach a lot of light coding to kids and teenagers and all sorts of people. So yeah, basically that's it.
Great. And you said it, but just to repeat for our audience, Rafa and I met, if I remember correctly, teaching a paper prototyping workshop, and that would have been my first time teaching low fidelity prototyping. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That was it was I used to work for the continuing studies department at Emily Carr, and they asked me to share that teaching space with you, because I think that you started teaching there or something, and they wanted me to be near you and offering support, and then we split the workshop, and I started with low fidelity prototype, and then you were teaching them like more like structured user interface design and stuff like that. It was a very fun project.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember that. Number two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Well, I think that more than knowledge, I think it is just like a particular way of connecting things. Like kind of like the ability to connect things that are not necessarily obvious to whoever is around you. I think that has worked well for me with clients, solving problems, or about their businesses, or about projects that I've been involved with from the arts perspective, or with students in the classroom, or with live coders coming up with performances or workshops. I think that there's always this particular ability to listen, and then to provide some insight related to the connection between the things that are being put on the table. That's something that I think that at this point is clear that I bring. Also, I really believe that my ability to navigate from design to art to technology, and kind of like moving naturally among these three different areas, is something that whenever I am is always that it is always something that feels as a strength, and connects, and always I think that helps expand whatever we do in these fields. Yeah, I think that's something that I say that makes me different among many other things, but I think it's the main one.
Great. And, to foreshadow an upcoming question about place, I imagine splitting your time between Colombia and Canada and other places in the world must influence what you do. I'm excited to hear you talk about place. Number 3 is why this, of all things, why do you do what you do?
Well, it's hard to know, but I believe it's kind of like, I mean, this is gonna sound like a really big statement, but I hope I promise it is not. Like, I think it's part of my nature to combine images and technology. My dad was an electronic engineer by training, and my mom worked compositing newspapers back in the 70s. They met at a newspaper here in Colombia. So that sounds like a combination result there. Like she started working when she was very young in the newspaper industry and working with metal type, and then I remember her, like, she retired working in PageMaker and working with computers. So my mom was kind of like a living history of print. And my dad was, although I didn't live with him, he was always like fixing things and fixing computers and electronic stuff. So I think that there's something there. So also my mom's dad, he was like a photographer. I'm not sure if I pronounce it properly, but he was kind of like printing images on metal type, right, via chemical processes. And he made a living in his small shop here in Bogota, like a long while ago. I never met him, but I'm sure there's also something about it. And I think that there's something about my own family. There's photographers in my family, although not like artistic photographers, but more like event photographers. There's some journalists and people doing cartoons. So as all of us, we are just a collage of many people that, all our relatives and parents, grandparents, and everything. So I think that nature is a force that makes me do what I do.
That's awesome. We had a recent episode with Alex Trochut, who is a New York-based designer, but talks a lot about that genetic aspect and how through genetics he got the art and design bug as well, which was interesting.
I know that Alex is was one of my favorite artists, like in the 2000s. Like, he's so good, definitely.
Great. Cool. Number 4, what does your future look like?
The future. I really have no idea, man. I think that I live in a place and a time of, uncertainty. I think that we all live, but living in South America and in Colombia is it's kind of like a constant to be in uncertainty, especially during these days. So the idea of a foreseeable future is, for me, has been always difficult to grasp. I think it's kind of like a condition that I have, that I can't really picture the future in my mind that easily. I think that I can only aim for an aspiration, right? Like aspiring to a future that provides some intellectual, physical, or emotional, or financial stability. I think that things are going so fast right now that that I don't know, what we do with art and technology is exciting, but it's also very challenging because it's changing so fast. And nowadays, with AI and all the technology, is so overwhelming and very exciting at the same time. I imagine that back in the 2000s, that's how a 40-year-old guy felt about the internet, and people like me in his 20s doing net art and flash sites and all that stuff. But nowadays, with AI and Web3 and all those things changing so fast, is really difficult to even imagine the future, right? Like I don't know, like less than a month and a half ago, the stable diffusion AI algorithm wasn't even live, and during this very short time, the whole landscape of image creation has shifted in ways that were unimaginable a year ago, right? So or that at least we thought we're gonna take a little bit longer. So I don't know. I don't know. I really wish that I end up being in some unknown area of work that allows me to bridge creativity, technology, and hopefully that combination can bring some healing to the life of the planet. I don't know. I don't know in which shape it'll be. I kind of like to leave that open to life because it will surprise us. And yeah, basically, it's a challenging answer for me. Thinking about the future is difficult, especially with the whole experience of 2020, right? All the suffering that happened during the pandemic and all the changes that happened in many lives around. Um, we got used to these changes quickly. I think that is surprising how we quickly recover, but it's also surprising how we somehow haven't processed what happened 2 years ago, and now are things moving faster and like and uncertain that I don't think that we'll have the time and space for doing so as a society. So yeah, that's about the future for me.
I like that answer. It would have been years ago now that I was listening to this keynote speaker and she called herself a futurist. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was kind of started looking around. And I was like, oh, there's this other person who's a futurist too. And then I saw like this area of design futures emerge as like a master's level kind of design area. And one of our guests, Marco Bevolo, talks specifically about Dr. Marco Bevolo talks specifically about design futures in his episode. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting area.
And also like this year I have been involved in some projects, but most of them have been related to the future. And then I see some calls for submissions and conferences, and the topics of different, I don't know, like talks are the future and the future. I haven't tried doing like a n-gram search of the word future online, but I believe there's been a spike of usage of the word future in the last couple of years, and also like with so many things happening in Ukraine and the pandemic and the recession and this hyper reality. I think that we're also in a search for an escape or a salvation in the future, right? In ideas about the future. So I think it's something quite interesting to kind of like keep an eye on and see what happens with this trend of thinking about the future these days.
Great. Okay. Number 5 is the location question. Let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
It's place. Well, I remember that I was in a stand-up comedy workshop, and one of the assignments was make a list of things that annoy you or that you find that make no sense in your neighborhood. And then I came back home and I couldn't put like more than 3. And then I realized that I don't have like a relationship with my neighborhood, like with people, like to the point of not really having anything else to add to that list of, like I hate that my neighbors do this and say this, or I don't know, they open the doors in this way or they play music. Like um there wasn't really something that created some weird feeling inside me. But then I realized that like I grew up with professionally with the internet, and I have lived in this no place that is the internet for a long while, even before most people got online and were in chats or emails or social networks. Like I have been all because of my work, I have been always working at the forefront of these type of things that then later on become mainstream. So that's I think that's my main place, like this no place of the internet during the pandemic, when most of us were locked in our houses. the activity of the live coding community worldwide exploded, and I remember having like 2 or 3 performances a week in virtual spaces. Like I don't think that the metaverse in its commercial inception was close to be mentioned back then, but we were like playing concerts there and making bands. Like I have a cumbia trio with a friend from Argentina. So if you're listening, hi, Iris, and with Rafa, another Rafa who lives in a small town nearby, and we have a trio called Sumergentes, and that's like a cumbia with live coding trio, and it was so much fun, and I couldn't wait to get to Friday to get online and play some music and meet my friends there. So yeah, I mean, I feel that that's kind of like my natural place, but of course I live in a 10 million people city, which is huge, and there's also this relation with a very chaotic and busy city like Bogota, and I love walking in the streets. So streets are always like one of my favorite places. I love walking at nights or walking in alleys and taking photos of walls and graffiti and stains on the wall, which sounds like design and art in the 2000s, but still do it and I still love it and I still find a lot of joy in walking and deriving in the streets in my city, something that I really like and mostly on my own.
Nice, I like it. Number 6, question 6 is, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
I love this one. This one is my favorite because I speak a lot about this with my girlfriend, with my friends. I really want to make a podcast about this question with friends, and I think that the key to answering this question is how do you imagine this situation, right? Like, because first, which point in your life would you pick up that means starting from scratch? Like, is it at 5 year old, like 10 year old, 15 year old? I don't think I really can pinpoint a starting point of my life, you know. But let's say that is when I left high school and I started becoming like kind of like a separated self from the home I grew up, and that was probably Bogota in the 90s, and I was studying like graphic design in a public university, and then I wondering like how am I gonna receive this advice, right? Like, is it a letter? Am I gonna hear a voice in my head, or am I gonna meet my older self? Um, I think that I kind of like the idea of receiving kind of like a VHS tape with myself, like my older self giving my advice. And then when I read this question, I think that I picked a few things for the for the advice. So the first one is find yourself a way into the computer labs of university. Get to know people who can teach you about coding and are willing to collaborate with you and make cool stuff. Uh, I think that I would say that you think you are complete now as a person, but you are not. Find yourself a therapist and dig into your own self and personal history. I would like to say to my younger self that you are not as ugly as you think. Be less shy with women. Uh, Take ayahuasca as soon as you can. That would be a big one. Another one, and I'm gonna borrow this one from a friend who answered this similar question, is like, make sure you end up with $1,000 in 2009. Buy something called Bitcoin. It's not gonna make sense, but hold before selling it until 2019. You will be rich. Definitely traveling more, learning businesses as soon as I could. Learn how to drive a car. I learned how to drive a car last year, and a very personal one that I would like to leave here to the field of the internet and the listeners of your show is try to talk to your sister. She being mad is not a transitory thing, and it's gonna get worse with time. And that would be my advice.
Great, I love it. Number 7, what's a day in your life like?
Well, not really, not very exciting. I think that as most of us right now, a lot of sitting in front of a computer, a lot of chats, taking some time in the morning for getting some sunlight. Bogota is a very cloudy city, very similar to Vancouver, and probably in October we share the same weather. Although here is all year October in Vancouver, rainy, kind of cold, but not February cold. Sometimes there's meditation at night, in the mornings, chilling and talking with my friend. We live together, playing with my cat, and bothering my cat all day. Drawing, I love drawing. My notebooks is something that I keep all the time with me. Now I'm playing some VR games. I quit games a while ago, but now I'm getting engaged again with VR games because they make me move, and I feel that they stimulate my brain. I got COVID early this year, and it hit me really hard with my mental health and memory and kind of like mind fog. It's been a challenging year because of that. So now with VR games, I feel that it's more than fun for playing the game. Is kind of like stimulating my brain into dealing with new types of information, which is something that I think is healthy, if it's not done like for 7 hours. Watching some movies and working, mostly working. I think that or learning software and playing with different, you know, types of open source tools for live coding. Mondays is my Buddhist day, and I meet like a Sangha group. And on the weekends, I spend time with friends, maybe having a drink. And Sundays, I don't know, friends and family as well. Yeah, it's very simple life.
Nice. 8 is lifelong learning is a popular topic. You kind of answered, but how do you stay up to date?
Well, lifelong learning, and by lifelong, I think something that lasts and is useful along the way. And I think that in Buddhism, I have found very profound teachings, and that especially contrast with the sometimes the learning that you can get from uh, digital culture and the industry that changes and changes so fast. But with Buddhism, I found a way to create some resistance to that, kind of like fast food information pandemic. And I follow the teachings of Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, and he has a very particular way of translating Buddhist teachings into everyday actions and practice. And I think that I started Buddhism because of uh, space where teachers got together like some years ago, and there was this methodology of discussion where people couldn't reply with opinions and theory, or quotes from books or stuff like that, but you only replied with your own experience. And at the beginning I was like, I can't believe they're gonna move past 3 interventions in this conversation, and we ended up in hours of very profound conversations where no one were replying or arguing or trying to convince people. That is something that is very difficult and is creating so much suffering in the world, and that totally transformed me. So answering your question, I think that making sure that I can identify that opinions are not really that important is something that brings a lot of happiness to my life.
That's awesome. It reminds me, yesterday I was spending some time in Altspace VR. It's a social virtual reality environment. I hadn't been in there for a long time, but I was in this event and there was this tech support worker talking about the beginner's mind. And
Mhm.
I was super fascinated by it. I guess I didn't know much about it. It's weird where knowledge can come from these days.
And
Um,
is definitely something needed these days because, like if you go to Twitter or social media, like everyone feels the urge to be an expert, but I mean, most people, like, we cannot know everything, and there's this tendency of people wanting to show that they know about everything, and making sure that you keep a beginner's mind helps you realize that there's some areas of discussions where you probably just need to keep silent and listen instead of talking. And I hope more people were aware of that, because that will make things much easier for the world right now.
Number 9, what tools do you use? Are you a digital nomad?
I am, although I am, working from home for the last couple of years. I Every time that I can, I go out of the city and go to the mountains and bring my laptop there, and hopefully get internet connection there to keep working and keep doing stuff. I have worked from several cities in my country, from the US, from Canada, from Germany, from Thailand, Vietnam. Uh, yeah, I think that that's now part of my nature. Sometimes I feel that it will be hard to go back to a physical office with people around me, but definitely it feels natural for me to be a digital nomad. Um, in terms of tools, definitely my notebook, my Moleskine notebooks are, you know, drawing and taking notes and writing things with my hands is so important. I keep doing it, and I hope that while my brain and hands and eyes keep allowing me to do, I will keep doing it for the rest of my life. Um, I, in for my everyday stuff, like I try to keep everything a cloud-based service. I mean, my laptop, I work in a Mac. I try to go back to PC because Macs are very expensive, and with the economy, like now a Mac is a lot of money for us. But it's very difficult to go back to Windows. Now I'm working with Linux for live coding stuff. I really like it. I use Figma. I use Affinity products. I ditched Adobe products a long while ago, and because I'm working in interfaces and UI, I don't really need to do it. A lot of Google products, Slack, Discord, Notion, and I'm recently using Midjourney and DALI and other OpenAI tools for inspiration and ideas. Is something that I now see everyone using just regularly, right? Like just listening to the machines. And for live coding, the community is inherits the open source community principles. So all the tools that we use are built by the community. So there's like Hydra, which is like a visual live coding tool built by Olivia Jack, who is from the US, but she lived in Bogota, and she finished Hydra in Bogota, and we were part of that process, which was beautiful. Flock, which is a collaborative tool for live coding built by Damian in Argentina. Tidal Cycles, created by Alan McLean in the UK, and several other tools built by the community, which is great to be part of that process of giving feedback, contributing here and there to some product, giving and talking to the authors and suggesting new features. That's something that is unique of that whole process.
Great. Halfway here, number 10. How do you deal with work-life balance?
Work-life balance. Well, I try not to work very late at night. That's something that I try to do. I really try to enjoy early mornings, not rushing in the mornings, doing some yoga or stretching, or maybe running up the hill, although I'm not a very sporty person. Meditating, reading a little bit, and try to keeping like a Monday to Friday schedule, and maybe leaving for Saturday a few things. I mean, for the last year, I have tried to keep like a 4-day work week, and leaving one day of the week to more art stuff and researching, or even for client stuff. But it's really hard when you're a freelancer. You don't have much control of the workflow, and when there's a lot of work, you gotta take it, and sometimes you don't have a lot of work, and then you stress out, and then I don't know, it's crazy. But I think that I can keep I keep a good balance between I think that I set a healthy set of limits with my clients in with projects, so I don't bring a lot of stress from work to my life.
That's great. I started meditating in the morning for 10 minutes after hearing almost every guest say they do yoga or meditation in the morning. It's a very common thread. I'm actually learning from these. Number 11.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Number
definitely.
11, number 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
I believe that in another dimension, I would probably be a cartoonist, as I wanted to be when I was a child, or probably a full-time illustrator, as I wanted to be when I was in college. But I ended up in this dimension being a graphic designer that fell in love with computer-based stuff, and then got fed off graphic design and started searching for answers in art, and ended up making more art with more computers. I don't think that maybe in another dimension I would be like a computer scientist, but I don't think that would be able to handle only that without creative expression. Um, I am now in the process of publishing my teenage year comic books, just for the sake of honoring that history of mine, and I hope that that's something that, with time, I would like to do more illustration just for me and for creating books, and uh, not necessarily for paying the bills with illustration, but definitely something that I do a lot, and I don't put it in my CV. So yeah, I think that's it.
Great. 12, what would you not like to do in terms of career?
Mm, Definitely, I don't. I don't want to be a bureaucrat. I don't want to be a corporate person, especially in an advertisement agency. I think that, and I'm not saying this publicly, and I don't know the repercussions in people if people who know me listen to this, but I have rejected many jobs with that profile, and well-paid jobs. I think that my financial well-being was not happy about me rejecting these jobs. But definitely I went that path 15 years ago, and I quit because I could see how soul-crushing these jobs were for creative spirits, not only for my own spirit, but definitely for people around me who are very talented and with many dreams and projects of creating beautiful things for the world, but then being burned with, I don't know, ad campaigns of boring stuff, or selling sugar to kids and toys to children, and things that are not necessarily what the world needs. I
Great.
am sure that there are super cool jobs in that industry, but I haven't seen much of it. But things have changed. I have faith that things change.
Great. 13, what's your favorite word, quote, or sentence?
As I said, like don't give opinion a lot of importance is one, and one thing uh, that would be one, and the other one would be not saying difficult, but we use this word in Spanish that is trabajoso, which means that requires a lot of work. So whenever I find myself saying like, oh, this, I don't know, this software is difficult, I try to rephrase it to something similar to, oh, this software requires a lot of work, or requires more work than usual. I think that would be something that I like to repeat as a mantra.
Great. Do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
It, yeah, definitely. Years ago, I don't know why I found myself having a lot of thoughts related to the what would have happened if, like what would have happened if I studied engineering, like things like that. And then I realized that I was wasting a lot of energy on thinking about that. And I think that that makes no sense because like, I don't have the information to even imagine what would have happened, right? Like I just have like a tiny bit of information, so I'm not really properly informed to spend time on that thinking. So it's something that even sometimes when I hear people spending energy and thinking about this, what would have happened if, uh, it's something that I don't like. I think it's a waste of energy.
15. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would you choose?
Definitely dispersion, whether if it's like in a good sense or a bad sense. I think that dispersion, maybe as a skill, is something that I can describe myself for.
16. What keeps you up at night?
I fall asleep pretty well. I think that the times that I have, like not sleeping well are because of I have a lot of work, like project that is about to be delivered and stuff like that. Uh, but I try to keep some hygiene and maybe taking some notes before going to bed and be careful about coffee and stuff like that. But fortunately, I feel fortunate that I don't stay up at night that often.
17. What's a dream you're chasing?
A dream, I think that just like unveil my own human nature via whatever, like whether it is art or talking to friends or going to therapy or I don't know, joining a psilocybin, like a mushroom therapy, like these type of experiences that kind of like unpack your own nature, your own story, that allow you to understand yourself is something that I think I'll be doing till I die. Is something that I love. Is something that every time that I learn something that shows me that I was wrong, that I can expand my understanding of something about society, about myself, about my nature. It feels difficult, but it feels very rewarding at the end. So, as a dream, is something that I'm always chasing. You
Final stretch here, number 18. What inspires you?
inspiration. Well, definitely people. Um, I don't really have a like an answer. I wish I had like a list of people or stuff that inspires me, but definitely the internet is something that like there's so much garbage there, but if you are good at picking the information apart and listening to people that are good at discerning that noise, you really find very inspiring stuff, from a guy that teaches you about the history of, I don't know, shaders and computer graphics, to someone in TikTok that is, I don't know, petting the cat and singing the cat a song, right? So I think that there's something beautiful about the internet that I love, is that ability of bringing inspiration from many things. Uh, but mostly people, right? Like that's the at the bottom of that is people just sharing, maybe being brave about putting themselves out and sharing a corner of their lives, and hoping that someone can listen to them, and hopefully finding them inspiring, is something that inspires me in itself.
Perfect. Number 19. Any advice you'd like to share?
I don't feel wise enough to share an advice, but uh I would say just don't spend a lot of time in your phone. I think that's something that in the future, uh, is gonna look really bad on our generations. I think that um, the attention economy is something that is hurting our our moment in history, our ability to heal the planet, our ability to be better human beings. I think that's being jeopardized by spending so much time with fast food information. And I heard something, and I know this is gonna sound contradictory, but I heard an advice from a therapist in Instagram, where she said that attention is so precious that you need to see it as an asset that you are exchanging for something else, right? So when you open, like, I don't know, without paying much attention, you open your computer and then you ended up like 20 minutes just like scrolling in a social network, like stopping for a second and saying, okay, my attention is so precious that I'm giving it to this scrolling. So is it worth giving it because it's so precious, or should I exchange it for something more valuable? And I think that mindful stopping and asking that has helped me during the last 2 months into dealing with literally addiction to chugging information like crazy, and then not even remembering what I saw and what I read and what I watched. So I think being more mindful about your attention and your information consumption online would be the advice that I would like to share in your platform, Thomas.
I like that. Great. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? Do you have a call to action for us?
Well, if you as a listener got until this point, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. And you can find me at www.rafaelpuyana.com. You will find by default my art stuff. And then there's a link there for my design stuff, which is in the middle of construction. But you can check me over there, rafaelpuyana.com, and in Instagram would be at rafapuyana.com. I think that those are my only two places.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thanks
So
so
thanks so
much.
much, Rafa. Awesome to hear that you didn't sell out to the ad agencies and keep doing the good work. I'm glad to hear that, and a great kind of recall of my first foray into prototyping. That's become a really important thing for me, and I have to thank you for that.
No, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to this space, and I'm really honored to be sharing this space with people that I admire, like John Maeda, which was, I think, that my first new media hero who inspired me so much. So I feel so honored to have been invited to the same space. Thank you, Thomas.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay.